5 outlaws rode toward a ranch no one dared visit, where an old man lived alone and hadn't spoken in months. They came to take his land, sure he'd fold easy. But when one outlaw laughed at a strange symbol carved into the doorframe, the air shifted. Their leader's face went pale. That mark wasn't just old, it was forbidden. And when hoofbeats thundered in the distance, they realized too late they hadn't attacked a man. They had violated a blood-bound promise, and someone was coming to collect. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dry land as 5 riders came slowly down the dusty trail. They looked like trouble, rough men on tired horses, kicking up dirt as they moved closer to a quiet, lonely ranch. The man leading them was named Riker Sloan. He had a cruel smile, the kind that meant nothing good. He thought today would be easy, just an old rancher sitting by himself on a porch, with no neighbors around and no one to hear a gunshot. A man like that was an easy target. But Harlan Pierce, the rancher, wasn't moving. He sat still in his wooden chair, his eyes calm, his hands resting on his knees. He didn't show fear. He didn't speak. He just watched as the riders came closer. Riker didn't care. He'd seen tougher men break. This old man wouldn't be any different, or so he thought. Then, something strange happened. As the sun slid lower, a beam of light hit the doorframe behind Harlan. It caught on something carved deep into the wood. At first, Riker didn't notice. But then the mark shimmered, just for a second. His grin faded. He leaned forward in his saddle and stayed at it, frowning. He didn't understand what it meant, but his gut started to feel tight. That mark didn't belong here. It wasn't just a carving. It was old. It had meaning. And it was the kind of thing you didn't mess with, not if you wanted to stay breathing. Riker looked at Harlan again, but the man hadn't moved an inch. Still quiet. Still watching. And now, something about all of this felt wrong. Riker didn't know why. He just knew the feeling in his chest wasn't excitement anymore. It was a warning. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure who held the power here. Harlan Pierce hadn't spoken to another soul in months. Not since the last trader passed through. And even then, he only nodded. Most days, he didn't see a reason to say much. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. His wife, Iona, had died 4 winters ago. And since then, the world had felt smaller. She was Cherokee, strong in ways people didn't always understand, and kind in ways they rarely deserved. Without her, the rooms inside the house felt colder, the wind outside louder, and the days longer than they used to be. Harlan still worked the land, though the harvest had been poor. His hands were marked with the life he'd lived, scars from war, burns from tools, and lines from time. But these days, there was still more than they moved. He sat on that porch every evening like it was his church, looking out, silent, waiting for nothing and everything. When he saw those riders coming, he didn't flinch. It was like he already knew how this would go. Maybe he'd dreamed it. Maybe he'd seen worse. But whatever the reason, his stillness wasn't fair. It was something deeper, something that made the air around him feel heavy, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Riker slid down from his saddle, dust kicking up around his boots as he adjusted his belt and walked toward the porch like he owned the place. The others fanned out behind him in a half circle, boots crunching dry ground, hands resting near their guns but not quite drawing. Not yet. Riker smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "We've been thinking," he said casually. "A place like this, it's wasted on one man. We'd be willing to buy it off you. Fair price. Or, things might go wrong out here. Accidents happen." Harlan didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes held steady on Riker's face like he was listening to the wind, not the man. The silence stretched too long. Riker's jaw tightened. "You deaf, old man?" Still nothing. That's when the others started moving. One kicked the door open, another stomped through the small cabin like a storm. Pots were knocked off shelves, clay shattering loud against the wood floor. A hand-woven blanket, Cherokee design, was ripped in half and tossed aside like garbage. Someone laughed, but it was nervous. The air was changing. One outlaw came back outside and, without warning, punched Harlan across the face. His head snapped to the side, slow and sharp, but he didn't fall. He straightened back up like a tree in the wind. Marked, not broken. That quiet look in his eyes didn't change. And now the men, all 5, started shifting their weight. Something was wrong. They'd broken a lot of people in their time. Why wasn't this one breaking? One of the younger outlaws, bowed and trying to look brave, wandered closer to the porch and finally noticed the carving on the doorframe. He laughed, calling out, "Boss, look at this fancy mark. Old man thinks he's some kind of artist." Riker rolled his eyes and stepped forward, ready to bark at him for wasting time. But the moment he saw the symbol clearly, everything inside him stopped. The color drained from his face so fast the others actually stared. He knew that mark. It wasn't decoration. It wasn't some rancher's carving. It was the Cherokee Protection Mark, carved only for people the tribe claimed as their own, and never given lightly. It meant family. It meant honor. It meant if you harmed the person behind that door, someone would come looking. Someone you didn't want to meet. Riker stepped back without meaning to. His voice cracked when he said, "Who put that there?" For the first time, Harlan moved. Just a small turn of his head. His voice was quiet, steady, carrying something deeper than grief. "Iona carved it," he said. "Said it would guard me when she no longer could." The outlaws froze. That name, Iona, had weight to it. Stories attached. Warnings whispered. Before anyone could say another word, a distant sound rolled across the open land. Hoofbeats. Slow at first, then faster, growing louder, many of them, moving like one body. The outlaws turned toward the ridge, and fear settled into their bones as the rhythm of approaching horses shook the air. The dust parted slowly as the hoofbeats grew louder, and then they appeared, riders on tall, steady horses, faces set, eyes sharp. No one shouted. No one pointed a weapon. They didn't need to. The Cherokee didn't arrive in chaos. They arrived in order, and their silence held more weight than the 5 outlaws' noise ever could. At the front of them rode a man older than Harlan, but with a spine like stone and eyes that missed nothing. Dakota Greyhawk, Iona's uncle, a man known across plains and hills, not for how loud he spoke, but for how much stopped when he looked your way. And now, Dakota was looking, not at the outlaws, not at their weapons, but at the blood drying on Harlan's cheek. Riker tried to explain, his voice suddenly too quick, too eager. "We didn't know he was. There was a misunderstanding. We were just passing through." But Dakota didn't blink. He looked past the words, saw the broken pottery, the torn beadwork, the bruises. His silence burned. Then, in a voice low and steady, he said what none of them were ready to hear. "This man once buried our dead when no one else would touch them. He carried medicine through snow 3 nights straight. When our children were too weak to cry, he lit the fire that kept them breathing." Riker looked confused, but Dakota's words kept cutting. "He earned that mark not because he married my niece, but because he saved our people when we could not save ourselves." The air changed. No one moved. And for the first time, Riker realized this wasn't a ranch. This was sacred ground, and the man they tried to break was already family to something far bigger than any gang. Dakota finally turned to the outlaws. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of stone. "Drop your weapons," he said, and they obeyed, not because of guns pointed at them, but because something in his gaze made defiance feel smaller than dust. Knives hit the deck. Pistols followed. The silence that fell wasn't relief, it was waiting. Then Dakota gave the sentence, and it wasn't death. It was worse. "You will fix what you broke," he said. "Every pot, every stitch of beadwork, every chair and frame you shattered in your foolishness. You will rebuild this man's home until it is as it was before your cowardice touched it." Riker opened his mouth, but no sound came. "When you are done," Dakota continued, "you will ride to every settlement between here and the mountains. And you will speak the truth. That you dishonored a man under Cherokee protection. That you raise your hand against one of our own." Harlan hadn't spoken again. He didn't need to. The sentence said everything. No blood spilled. No guns fired. Just shame carved into their names like the mark on Harlan's doorframe. A justice deeper than revenge, one that would follow them longer than death ever could. Days passed, slow and quiet. Harlan sat at his table, gently threading the broken beadwork back together with hands that still remembered her touch. The colors were faded now, but he matched them by memory. He took his time. One morning, he walked up the hill with a small basket of wildflowers and laid them by the wooden marker where Iona rested. He stood there for a while, watching the wind move through the grass, remembering the way she used to hum when she carved. He could still see her hands working that symbol into the wood, not with fear, but with care. Back then, he thought it was to keep danger out. But now, he understood. It wasn't about keeping men like Riker away. It was about making sure he was never truly alone after she was gone. That he'd still be seen, still held, still claimed. Dakota rode back before the next moon, said he'd visit more often now. Harlan just nodded. That evening, as the sun dipped low, he sat again on his porch. The light hit the mark on the doorframe, and for one long, golden moment, it glowed like she'd just carved it yesterday.